video is about a tool, the price of the tool, the quality of the tool, and a kind of relationship between the maintenance of the tool over time and the price and the quality. And since we're talking about a chainsaw here, let me just say that you are signing up. When you get a chainsaw, you are signing up for perpetual, routine, and constant maintenance. That's just how a chainsaw works. To keep it running over the long run and through daily use, even weekly use or regular use, to keep that thing running, it's gonna need constant attention. That's again just how chainsaws work. They get dirty, they get full of sawdust and chip and stuff, they get dull, and parts break on a chainsaw. Every chainsaw on earth, if you run that thing regularly, it's gonna have parts that break on it. It's just the deal with chainsaws. So what you're looking at is my firewood pile. And it's mostly cut stuff. Like, it's been cut down, and when it dries out, when I got some time, it's ready to be split. But there's also some longer pieces out there, which always need hacking at and shortening and trimming down, which is why I tend to always have what I call a wood pit saw. Like a powerful chainsaw that I can use out here at the wood pit to trim things down, cut up logs, and stuff like that. And you can probably see that I'm just a little bit on the rough side with my saw. Now, I'm not gonna just straight up abuse a chainsaw. Like, I'm not trying to bust my saw when I'm using it, but I want the saw to work for me. And if it does, I'll treat it right, you know? I'll clean it up, I'll maintain it, I'll keep it going. But overall, I pretty much believe that tools you're using outdoors, like not shop tools and stuff, but the tools you're gonna use outdoors, you should be able to drop them, kick them on accident, knock them out of the truck, and they should still work. You know, if they're too fragile, they just don't belong outdoors. It's just my own personal philosophy. I'm not saying you should be able to throw your chainsaw down on the pavement, pick it up, and it's gonna run. Like, that might not work out for you, but I tend to believe that a tool for outdoor use needs to be, you know, kind of like on the sturdy side. I should also say that I'm not really like a chainsaw repair guy. Not at all. And you'll see when I tear into this saw in a few minutes here later in the video, you'll see that I'm not like a pro chainsaw repair dude who's like rebuilding chainsaws left and right. I just do the bare minimum maintenance on my saws to keep them kicking. Alright, so how much should you pay for a tool? Or maybe the question could be rephrased as, what's your most expensive tool? And was it worth it? And how long should that tool last? In particular, if you pay more, should the tool last longer? And if you pay less, is it right for that tool not to last as long? Now, my buddy Tim had some answers to these questions. Now, Tim was like a big old concrete guy, like just a mountain of a man. And he used to say, like straight up and very emphatically, Tim would say, a good tool should last a lifetime. Now, at the time, I agreed with Tim, because, you know, you weren't going to disagree with Tim. But later, as I thought about it, and as I worked different jobs, I came to realize that that's just not always true. Some tools exceed that lifetime expectation and go through multiple lifetimes and sets of hands. But some tools, they just don't. They burn out, they get used up, they break, and they're just shot. In some trades and on some jobs, you just burn through your tools. It's almost like the way the tool works. And it's not always because you are abusing and neglecting the tool. So here's the question asked another way. If you do burn through your tools, having to replace them on a regular basis or even like an irregular basis, should you then buy cheaper, disposable tools? Or should you still buy the best stuff, you know, like the top of the line, cream of the crop tool, knowing that that thing is going to be junked or passed on in a short amount of time? And then at the back of all this is the dang question, what is the best tool? And is it always the most expensive one? All right, the price. What is the price of this saw? I paid $116 for this saw on Amazon. $116. A steel saw of the same size engine pretty much can run you no problem $800. But how long should the saw last at that price? It's pretty much an eighth of the price of the more expensive saw of the same size, so does that mean it should last an eighth as long? A good chainsaw isn't just good on the first day. It's good months and years down the road, so let's take this one back to the shop and take a look inside. Alright, so at this point, two things are obvious about the saw. Number one, it's cheap. And number two, it'll rip through some wood, at least on the first tank of gas, right? It's just got a funky interface, mildly obnoxious. Number one, this is your shutoff. These toggles will, once in a while, when you run a saw a lot, get knocked and hit, and the saw will get shut off. So whatever, a little switch here. This is your choke, and then to lock the trigger in place, it's kind of like a three-way. I did that kind of fast. Basically, this is on a safety, right? But this is your three-way locker. Pop that guy in when you're starting the saw. A lot of stuff on here is standard, straight up. This is your gas tank. It's got a stop on the knob and all that. Your oil for your bar oil is down here. And if you want to open these guys by hand, you can. If they get stuck, they do have little nubbins here for a screwdriver. So, you know, a lot of the stuff is standard. What's not standard about the fuel mix, right here on the cap, it says 40-1. 40-1 on the cap. But then on the rest of the saw and in the manual and everything, it's asking for 25-1. At some point, someone decided this thing needs a lot more oil than they originally intended. A lot of saws like these steels, they will run on a 50-1. You're putting twice the amount of oil in your gas mixture here. All right, but the really funky stuff about this saw has to do with maintenance. All right, so number one is that to tighten the chain, you've actually got to move this screw right here. So that is just kind of weird, you know? Like pretty much every chainsaw you're gonna get these days, you will loosen up your nuts to adjust your chain and you'll have a tensioner like right here. But no, this one you gotta do it right here, which means you're kind of looking to get the little game of bloody knuckles going on here. I'm not saying it's impossible to tighten the chain, but it's just one of those interface things that's just mildly annoying. The other is that there's no retention nuts on here. Small, insignificant, finicky detail, but I think a lot of us get used to not losing these nuts, and these are just a lot easier to lose. So anyway, just keep them on your bench or whatever when you're cleaning stuff out. It's got a little bit of gunk. Like I said, I only ran one tank of gas through this saw, so it's not looking, you know, when I clean my saws, I would just come in here and blow all this out. But I'm not seeing like some kind of strange buildup. It does have a grease port here, so you can grease the bearing out here at the nose. Alright, air filter, kind of like a lower end filter, but I see these on other saws, like my Echo has a filter just like this one. It's just this dude, and this guy actually has a hole in it already. It's got a seal here. You seat it down in this hole here, and just kind of got to make sure it goes in there, and that's your air filter. Spark plug boot. That's like mildly funky. The connection on the spark plug is this spring. So instead of like a sleeve, like a copper sleeve, it's just got that spring on there. Plug is in there. This guy's taken an Allen key. So we got the top off the housing, and just a couple little things to notice. One is that this is your kill switch, right? So basically this guy, when you bring it down, is just making contact with this ground and shutting everything off. Pretty straight up. That's usually how they work. They're just in different places. And then the carb's got this kind of plate on the top of it that'll pop off, just so we can kind of get a better look at it. Alright. So that's just like a little anti-vibe thing. Just got a little bit of anti-vibe rubber in there, just for when this baby shakes, just so it doesn't also rattle. And then this is a single piece of aluminum that kind of serves as a cover and the air intake. So right now the carb is completely loose, and I can pop the choke off. The throttle attachment is right underneath. And then I just have my 2 fuel lines. And actually those are on, are they barbed on? They're just tight. I'm gonna leave those guys on there. But anyway, the carb pops out, and with it, see, it's just a square carb, just like straight up like you've seen in every other saw. And then this is just a little ring. I don't know what you call this, but it's sort of like the air manifold that goes into the engine. And this little ring was sitting right there, and it just sort of popped out. But if we look in there, we should be able to see the cylinder head. Alright, so that is pretty much a clear look at how the carburetor is housed in here. These are your adjustments for your low idle, high idle. I'm just going to button that back together before we open up the next side of the saw. This is basically an afterthought dust gasket, as far as I can tell. Just trying to keep some stuff out of the engine. You know, for 1 tank of gas, this is looking pretty clean. And I don't know what this looks like to you on camera, but it's not aluminum. This is definitely some kind of plastic. So this would be the coil with the shut-off going to the little kill switch here, and the main wire coming from the plug. I'm over on the drive shaft side and looking at the clutch, but let me just see if I can just get a wrench in there and twist it. It's a little bit weird. So to get deeper into the maintenance on the drive shaft, like replace the clutch bearing or the clutch, you're gonna need to get that guy off. So now we're looking at the muffler up in front, and muffler's got 2 ports right here. Let's just kind of dig into it and see if it has a screen, you know, like a spark arrestor screen, how maybe portable or modifiable the muffler is. I'm just seeing some weird stuff. So on the muffler, it's got this M bracket, which for Garwinner, I don't know. It's just an M. It does have a fairly brazen set of dogs on here. I mean, nothing like to totally freak out about, but you know, not too shabby. Alright, that be the muffler. And it's a single unit, so you can't really open it up. If you were gonna port it, and I really don't know why you would, you just port this face, you know, just dig into the face. You can see like right through this muffler, so it's not like it's really impeding the airflow or the exhaust flow at all. And there are definitely no spark arresters or anything, so if you were going to use this chainsaw like out in the bush in dry pine needles and stuff, I would watch your butt. If you threw sparks out here, they definitely would not be arrested before coming out. And then, I don't think I showed you this, but there is an adjustment right here, just a screw for the oiler. so you can jack it up. Actually, jack it up this way, more oil, or lower it down. And it really wasn't spraying oil when I was testing it out, so I think I'm gonna increase that flow. I'd always rather have more oil on the bar. I think for right now, I'm just gonna cover it and restrict airflow, probably a little bit, but I'm not gonna worry about it. At least it'll keep gunk from getting in there. All right, so having poked around inside the guts of this saw a little bit, what do I think? Basically, I'm of the mind that pretty much most of the things you buy these days are kind of problematic and cheap in one way or another. So I'm not like crazy about, you know, like Stihl or Husqvarna saws and like, man, they're the best, because they've got problems. They're plasticky. They've let me down. So I'm a little bit of that mind. I do think about the cost, and this saw is so freaking inexpensive. It's just hard to believe. I mean, this is what, like $160 full price? I think it's even listed at less than that when it's on sale, like 116 or 6 or something. So you can get this saw really freaking cheap. You know, like dirt cheap. So, you know, I think that's a factor. Now, as far as maintenance goes, if you can't pull that clutch, it's not going to be like a saw you own for 20 years and, you know, work on repair religiously. It's just not. Like, if you can't get that piece off and you strip your clutch and you need to replace your clutch bearing and you can't find a clutch bearing that fits, it's kind of like a throwaway saw. But, you know, I've paid money, like real money, for other saws that ended up being throwaways too, just because they freaking let you down. So, you know, you're always gambling a little bit when you buy a piece of equipment. I guess I would say that if you don't mind the minor annoyances, you know, like the nuts that are disconnected from this and you might lose them, and the fact that it's just kind of awkward to tighten the chain because you got to come around front. You know, if you don't mind that stuff, and if you don't use this saw every freaking day to make your living, if you use the saw every day to make your living, I would probably hope that you would get a really good piece of equipment. You know, that's kind of like what we all hope for. But sometimes you can't afford that. If you can't afford that, save some money, get a cheaper saw, and you might find out you get some good mileage out of it. The thing I always think about is if you buy the expensive tool, the really gourmet top-of-the-line tool, and you trash it, you know, through no fault of your own, you just trash it. For some reason, an accident happens, you're out that cash and the tool. Whereas, you know, these kind of cheaper, somewhat more disposable tools, there's like something to be said for them in that you're not throwing away the same amount of dough. All right, I'm not a chainsaw mechanic, but I play one on YouTube, so let's fire this up and see if it actually runs after being monkeyed with. All right, it's the Garwinner 58cc. I'm gonna keep using it and I'm gonna keep maintaining it as best I can because, you know, it's kind of a beast. And the thing about my other beast is that I don't wanna put too much mileage on it if I don't have to. So it's gonna be kind of like a replacement for my 362 when I can use it. Probably not up in the tree so much, but definitely on the ground and out at the firewood pit. I've said it before, but in this video in particular, it bears repeating. This is not necessarily like a how-to video, you know, how to get a cheap saw, cut with it in the snow, get it all wet, and then bring it inside and tear it apart. It's more of like the story of how I did that, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I think it's working out, and I might have even learned something. All right, see you in the next project.